Shalom Aleichem. We have here, this is a new Chumash. A dear friend gave this to me. Chumash, this is the 5 books of the Torah with an interpolated translation and commentary based on the works of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So let's take a look. Has very nice insights into the Parsha. Very nice insights. This is Parshas Vayeira. So anyway, in front of the Parsha, it has an overview of the Parsha. You can read this if you want. This is very interesting. It puts it into a perspective. Parshas Vayeira is the second of the 2 parshiyot devoted exclusively to the life and times of Abraham. The fact that Abraham's life is chronicled in 2 parshiyot indicates that it comprised 2 distinct phases. In fact, if we examine the events recorded in these 2 parshiyot, we are left with the impression that Abraham repeated in Parshat Vayeira virtually everything he did in Parshat Lech Lecha. Both parshiyot open with him experiencing a revelation of God and receiving the promise of progeny. In both parshiyot, his wife Sarah is abducted by a Gentile king. In both parshiyot, he fathers a son, banishes Hagar, and enters into treaties. In both parshiyot, his righteous behavior is contrasted with the immoral behavior of his nephew Lot. It is as if Abraham had to repeat everything he experienced in this first parsha, his first life or level of being, but on a different level, in order to infuse his past accomplishments with a new level of divine consciousness. So anyway, you can read this, and let's take a look at the Parsha itself. This is a very wonderful book, a Sefer. Vayeira elav Hashem be'elonei mamrei v'hu yoshev pesach ha'ohel kichom hayom. On the 3rd day after his circumcision, 15th of Nisan, 2047, God appeared to Abraham to pay a visit to the sick. So Hashem, went to Avram to be mevaker chole, to pay a visit for the sick. This occurred in Elonim, on the plains of Mamre. God revealed himself to Abraham in Mamre's territory as a reward for his having advised Abraham to follow God's commandment to circumcise himself. Abraham was sitting at the entrance to the tent and looking out for the travelers to host. Even while he was very sick, he was sitting at the entrance of the tent looking out for travelers to host. But God had made the heat of the day unnaturally intense so that no one would venture out on the roads, thus giving Abraham a chance to rest and recover. Abraham started to stand up in deference to God's presence, but God said, "You remain seated, and I will stand." Vayisa Einov Vayisa Einov Vayar v'hinei shlosha anoshim nitzovim alav vayar vayarotz lekrasam mipesach ha'ohel vayishtachu ortzo. While Abraham was changing his bandages, he looked up, and behold, 3 men were standing before him. He took note that they hesitated to approach him because he was in obvious discomfort. Therefore, after asking God to wait while he attended them, he ran towards them from the entrance to the tent and prostrated himself on the ground. Let's see some of the notes. One moment. God appeared to Abraham. When, as a young boy, Rabbi Shalom Dover of Lubavitch learned this verse for the first time, he came in tears to his grandfather, Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, the Tzemach Tzedek, and cried, "If God appeared to Abraham, why doesn't he appear to me as well?" In reply to his little grandson's anguished question, the Tzemach Tzedek told him, in essence, that Abraham merited having God appear to him because, although he had indeed refined himself enough to attain very sublime levels of divine consciousness, he at the same time knew that God is infinite, and that therefore there was still an infinite number of levels of divine consciousness to attain. This recognition left Avram feeling grossly inadequate, as though he were still encrusted by layers of insensitivity to divine awareness that needed to be removed, to be circumcised, in order to bare his heart before his Creator. Much is to be learned both from the child's impassioned question as well as from his grandfather's answer. Firstly, we learn that we must yearn, even cry out for God to reveal his presence to us. Secondly, we learn that we too can merit to have achieved spiritually. That we too can merit to see God's presence if we realize that no matter how much we may have achieved spiritually, we are still not perfect. We still need to circumcise ourselves, to remove the foreskin of the heart, which prevents us from attaining yet higher levels of divine consciousness. On the 3rd day after his circumcision, since the Torah's commandments are meant to affect the entire material universe, including the physical body, they must be fulfilled in a natural, non-miraculous way. This is why God waited until the third day after Abraham's circumcision to visit him. God's very visit would have immediately healed Abraham miraculously of his wound. Therefore, had he visited Abraham any earlier, he would have disrupted the natural healing process that circumcision requires, thus risking compromising the integrity of Abraham's fulfillment of the commandment. Only on the 3rd day, when a wound begins to heal naturally on its own, did God visit him and cause the wound to heal completely. He looked up, and behold, 3 men were standing. During the course of his conversation with God, Abraham was profoundly engrossed in the divine revelation. Even during our own prayers, when we are the ones who initiate the divine encounter, we are enjoined to first clear our minds of any distracting thoughts. The fact that Abraham noticed the men, despite the intensity of his concentration, shows his extraordinary sensitivity to others. So in other words, he was profoundly engrossed in the divine revelation, Abraham. But even during this, he still noticed that there were three men, and they needed to be attended to. They had to be achnasas orchim, to extend hospitality to wayfarers. So he went and he wanted to show them hospitality. So the fact that Abraham noticed the men, despite the intensity of his concentration, shows his extraordinary sensitivity to others. This here is this sefer, this Chumash is Chamishi Chumshei Torah, the Chumash, based with an interpolated translation and commentary based on the works of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So this is available by Kohot. Thank you very much. Hatzlacha in the learning. Thank you in the davening and the tzedakah. Thank you very much. Kol tov.